I'm going to be showing you some examples of simple solutions that we've quickly put together in the Power Platform that solve everyday business issues. But first, I'd like to set the scene by adding some context about the importance of changing your approach to digital adoption. To do this, I've been reviewing the Gartner CIO report that was compiled at the end of last year. The first important fact to note is that despite the economic uncertainty of the last 18 months, 80% of CEOs are increasing their digital investments. This is for three key reasons: to counter economic pressures, to address supply constraints, and because of the increased scarcity of talent. The reasons for digital investment have a variety of top and bottom line impact objectives. The number one top line objective was to improve the customer experience. It's important to consider the reasons behind any investment. You can be super lean in your processes, but if your customer experience is poor, you'll struggle to win and, more importantly, to keep customers. Of course, a number of bottom line improvements can also go towards improving the customer experience. Operational excellence will assist in quicker delivery of a quality product. Increased employee productivity is a key metric in most companies. It's important to think about how changes to systems and processes can be made to increase that productivity. Digital debt is a new term that's been coined for that feeling that you've been constantly working all day yet achieved little, wading through emails, team messages, websites or systems without actually getting things done. Perhaps it's time we start considering more how we relieve this burden from the employees. When the investment has been made in digital projects, the reality is often far behind the expectation. Consideration has to be given about how to get to an end result quicker, more effectively, and for a lower cost. So in the report, there were a number of suggestions about ways that you can accelerate and better improve your digital implementation projects. I've picked two key ones out, which I'm going to focus on here and then feed into the demos that I'll be doing later on. So the first one is to contribute IT talent to the business to create a fusion team that can accelerate high priority digital initiatives. Fusion teams allow a combination of business resources and IT resources to work in tandem, allowing a mixing of ideas and experiences to get to a quicker end result and an ROI. They allow IT people to gain an element of business perspective to changes that are taking place, and it gives business people the chance to learn about architectural and security processes that have been set up by the IT team to protect the business. The second suggestion is to find talent in unconventional places. If you do this, it helps you to progress internal lower priority projects that have an indirect impact on your financials. So effective fusion teams mean a change in the way that projects are worked on. Rather than focusing on project management, the focus shifts to product management. And typically longer projects work to milestones and point-in-time delivery. A fusion team should focus more on rapid iterations and continuous delivery of improvements to the digital product. The products become outcome-driven and concerned with the business capabilities and the end-user experience. When it comes to finding new digital talent, there are a number of different options that businesses can follow, and the top half dozen or so that people responded with are listed here. The most surprising fact on this slide for me is that only 12% of companies employ from college or university. The benefits of utilising different sources of talent include distinctive thinking. So people leaving education today have a completely different experience set to people who left a quarter of a century ago. They've grown up from babies surrounded by digital tech. They haven't gone through the evolution of computing. They expect quick, simple apps. Employed from different backgrounds, so think about different genders, race, ages, sexuality. This brings neurodiversity and different ways of thinking to your team. When you look at employing students and interns, it also brings in a low cost option. So you're looking at entry level wages for students or no cost potentially for interns. Startups is another option that's listed there. They may be willing to develop IP for you in return for retaining the IP for themselves. So if we're looking to get the business more involved with the creation of solutions and look at alternate resource types to help them, how do these two marry up with the complexities of development? So it's worth looking initially at the different types of development, which conveniently rhyme as pro code, low code, and no code. And what do they all mean? An example of pro code is Business Central AL code, which is developed in Visual Studio Code. Other examples you might be familiar with are JavaScript, Python, or C++. This development is typically carried out by experienced developers, which can take years to learn, and they work in structured teams and develop to detailed specs. So the Power Platform is positioned as a low-code or no-code offering. This is a modern alternative to traditional software development. Low-code allows both professional developers and citizen developers, as Microsoft call them, to quickly create apps of varying complexity to solve business problems. This approach reduces both the cost and the timescale to deliver solutions and allows rapid iterations to modify and improve apps. No-code solutions use visual building blocks and a simple intuitive interface rather than coding languages. Often the most complex part are getting the logic right and being able to use Excel-like functions. Both types allow rapid proof of concept development, which can be tested in live environments and refined in conjunction with users. So the Power Platform encompasses a number of different solutions, and I've got a few of them here, which I'll be focusing on in a minute. So the Dataverse is the data platform, which is used to store data centrally by Power Apps. The Dataverse is also used as the foundation for a range of Dynamics 365 applications, such as sales, customer service, and HR. Business Central is not built on the Dataverse, but there is a standard connector that allows you to synchronize data into it. Power Apps are applications built on the Dataverse or other data sources such as SharePoint. They're compatible with web, mobile, or tablet, meaning one app can be used across different business environments. And Power Automate is a tool used for business process automation, or BPA. A lot of what I'm covering today is within Power Automate, so it's worth having a high-level idea of what Power Automate flows can do. So there's three different key kinds of Power Automate flows. There are automated flows, which are triggered by an event, such as an email arrival or someone mentioning your company on social media, a change in data, such as a new customer being created in Business Central. There are now over 350 standard Power Automate connectors, and it's relatively simple to build custom ones if required. You then have instant flows, which are exactly that. You press a button and it triggers a flow, and you get scheduled flows that work on a timer and run at a predetermined time. Gartner have also produced their Magic Quadrant reports, which you might be familiar with. They now have one for low-code apps. As you can see, the Microsoft appear in the leaders segment, which is with excellent ratings for ability to execute and completeness of vision. It's that completeness of vision that I think is essential. So you've got Windows, Microsoft 365, Azure, Business Central, Power Apps. So we've looked at a number of scenarios in a customer lifecycle that most companies encounter that involve manual processes or rekeying of data into different systems. For each of them, we've come up with a simple solution to show how the Power Platform could be used to solve the problems. These aren't polished, completed solutions, but a proof of concept to try and get you thinking about how these tools can be used within your business. With all these Power Apps and flows we have made, there are 0 changes to standard Business Central. So I've not added any fields. I've made no changes to the API. No developers were used or harmed in the making of these apps. So now we're going to move across to the demo. So let's start going through our different scenarios. So the first one is about creating a new customer and onboarding them. Now, some companies will have different processes they follow to create a new customer. It might be that you just send an email signature through and ask someone to create a customer in your system, or it could be you send out a Word document or a paper document and ask someone to fill it out, and then you copy and paste that information into Business Central. So we've taken a slightly different approach. So we're going to create a new customer here, and we're going to take a standard template in Business Central. And we're going to put the contact name. So this will be Dan Cook. And then we're going to trigger the new company form process. This is a button that will trigger a Power Automate flow. So when I click on that, it pops out a little pane on the right hand side here on flow pane, and it will ask me who I want to send this email to. So I'm going to send it to Dan Cook. He's our customer, Dan Cook, not me. And then run the flow. So that flow has now gone off and it's created a record in our Dataverse database for that particular customer, and then sent an email to our customer saying, please could you complete this form? So we'll come out of here. This is customer number 270. And go to our inbox, and we can see here that as part of our onboarding process, please can I ask you to fill in the form below. So we click on the link. This opens up a very simple little Power App that we've built. So we can fill in our details. So I'm going to pop in a VAT registration number in there. Then I'll save and submit it. So what the save and submit does is it takes the detail that I put into that particular Power App page and it pushes it back into the Dataverse table. So what we have is an intermediary holding table in Dataverse. So the data is stored in there. Then that will trigger a flow, which is just, like I said, we've got an email now, that will ask the initiator to go through and review the detail that's been put into the system to then approve it and send it into Business Central. So we're going to close that. Now I've got an email saying there is a new company waiting for approval. Please use the link below. So if I click on the link, this opens up another Power App that we've built. And here we can see we've got the Dan Cook demo. So this is the information I just entered. So Dan Cook demo company, I've got an email address, etc., a VAT registration number. I'm happy with that. If you're happy with it, click the big green tick and that approves it. So that's now gone from my new company approvals request. What then happens in the background is the Dataverse table is updated again to say that the company information has been approved. And a flow is then triggered from that approval that will take the data and will synchronize it into Business Central and update the customer record within Business Central. And when it's done that, it sends an email back out to the initiator saying it's been approved. So here we can see the company Dan Cook demo has been approved. And if we go back to Business Central and we scroll down the list to our customer 270, we can see now we've got a company name, a company address, and a VAT registration number. So those are the details I've put in through the Power App. So that's now a fully fledged customer in Business Central. Using the template has meant that all of the financial piece of information I require, such as these posting groups, have already been filled in, and the customer has filled in the address details. So the next step in the process is to carry out a credit check for this customer. Obviously, credit checks are becoming increasingly important with the financial environment that we're finding ourselves in at the moment. So it's really important to stay on top and ensure that you're not exposing your company to undue risk. So we've created another Power Automate flow here that integrates into DocuSign. So to CreditSafe. CreditSafe are one of the largest credit checking companies in the world and hold a database of something like 350 million different companies around the world. We've used them because they've got a very good API, but obviously there are other people like Experian have got similar, so we could use that as well. It's just CreditSafe was the one that we chose. So when I run the credit check, the pane will pop out on the right hand side again, asking me to run the flow. Gives me a little bit of a warning down here saying what it is we're doing. We're using Dynamics 365 Business Central, CreditSafe, and Office 365 Outlook. So I'm going to say, yep, that's fine, run the flow. So this now takes this company information and it contacts CreditSafe. It asks for a company report for that particular customer. And then with the company report, which we receive back, which has got a vast amount of data in it, it then removes the credit limit from it and uses the credit limit to update the customer record in Business Central. So if I now refresh this page, you'll see the one that's highlighted has now got a £75,000 credit limit. So credit limit has now been updated. Up here we can see. And it's also sent an email. So there's an email being sent to Dan Cook saying, please be aware that the credit check has been carried out and that the credit limit has changed. It's increased from £0 to £75,000. Please check if this has any implications. And there's a link that I've inserted onto the email that takes you straight to the customer card. Now, it doesn't have to just notify if there's an increase. Obviously, the main one's if there's been a decrease. So what you could also do is this obviously been triggered manually. You could schedule a flow. So you could have a flow that does exactly the same thing, but then checks periodically. So maybe once a month, you go through all your customers and do a credit check for all of your customers in the system. Or you can modify Business Central slightly, include a last credit check date, and then maybe do it every 3 months or every 6 months. So you know that constantly you're keeping in check and making sure that you're aware of the exposure and the liability that you've got with your customers. So that is now a credit checked customer and they've got a nice credit limit of £75,000. For the next step, we're going to create a new sales quote. So here we are creating a new sales quote for Dan Cook's company. And Dan Cook wants to buy a couple of our wonderful Cronus bikes. So I put 2 with the quantity in there and say it's for Dan, it's a little personal message. Now, see, when you create a quote, normally you have to print it out and maybe you mail it to someone, or maybe you email it from Business Central. Sometimes people give you purchase orders, sometimes they don't. So what we've done is we've created a way that ensures that you at least get the proper digital signature for this sales quote. So under Automate, we've now got a DocuSign send quote. So we've integrated DocuSign. There's an out-of-the-box connector. They're one of the largest digital signature companies in the world. There are others like Adobe Sign who also have a connector in Power Automate, but we've chosen DocuSign. So we're going to run this process. Flow pops out. It tells me that it's going to be using Dynamics 365 Business Central and the DocuSign demo account. So we're going to run that flow and off it goes. Now what this is doing, it is creating in DocuSign what's called an envelope. So an envelope contains all the documents that you want to get signed by the customer. So it creates the envelope. It then asks Business Central for a copy, a PDF copy of this sales quote. It retrieves the copy of the sales quote and uploads it into the envelope with DocuSign, and then requests that the person I send it to gives us a digital signature for that sales quote. So let's close quote 1075 now, flip across to our emails. This is now Dan Cook, the customer. He's received an email saying, can you review quote 1075 as requested? He clicks on the link that opens up the PDF within the envelope on the DocuSign website. So here we've got a PDF copy of the sales quote, and then it's asking for a signature. So all you need to do now is click on that, which provides Dan Cook's digital signature, and then we click finish. So you can't finish without providing the signature because I've requested that as being one of the criteria that needs to be fulfilled. So that's now been signed. So what that then does is once it's been signed, the envelope is marked as completed. That then triggers a new flow that says on completion of the envelope, go into Business Central, find quote number 1075 and convert it from a quote into an order. It also then sends an email to say that the quote has been signed, quote 1075 has been signed and converted to an order. So if I now look at Business Central, 1075 there, if I refresh, has now gone. And if we go to our sales order page, it should now be, unfortunately the numbers series a bit all over the place, a new sales order for 2 bicycles for Dan. So that's the quote that's been digitally signed and then converted to an order. You could potentially link the attachment to a Business Central, or you could put a link into the envelope on DocuSign if you so wish, so you've got access to it very easily from the order. But again, it's a way of just ensuring that you're following the correct processes. You could potentially combine that with locking down permissions, so people can't manually convert a quote to an order, and that can only be done through this process. But again, it's just an idea of a way in which you can start utilising this functionality. So the last couple of bits I want to show are the statement and the copy invoice. So I'm sure most customers with Business Central send out statements regularly. So you send out a statement, which is a list of all the different invoices that particular customer has that are owing to you. We've taken a slightly different approach. So we're using a Power Automate flow to go through and check each customer that has an outstanding invoice. And then we are compiling an email of all those invoices and sending that out to the customer. So this will be run, it's a scheduled flow that will be run, for instance, on the 1st of each month. So it sends the email out and it says the invoice number, the amount, the currency, and then the final column is the request copy column. So I'm sure a lot of you have an experience whereby you ring up and request payment for an invoice because it's overdue, and the customer says to you, I'm really sorry, I've not got that invoice, or I've lost that invoice, we never received the invoice, whatever it might be. So then you have to go through, find the invoice in the system, print a copy of it out, and then mail it to them or email it to them, whatever it might be. You can achieve the same thing through a portal, so a self-service portal, but obviously there's a cost associated with setting it up and maintaining it, etc. So what we've done is we've created a very simple process whereby when the statement's sent out, it says, if you do not have a copy of an invoice, please click the link and send the generated email. A copy of the invoice will be sent to you. So each of these is a link. And when you click on that link, it creates you a new email. So it's an email that's going to go into, say, your accounts department, for instance, and it just has a subject, copy of invoice 103015. I hit send. That then goes into a monitored inbox. So there is a flow that we've got running in the background that monitors the inbox and looks for particular keywords within the email subject. So once it receives an email which says copy invoice, it will retrieve the invoice numbers from the subject. So we've got a little function there that strips the numbers out. It goes into Business Central. It validates that the email that is sent in the request is from the same domain as the customer that has that invoice number. And then if that is the case, it requests a PDF copy of the invoice, which it generates, downloads from Business Central, and then it returns the email back to the originator of the request. So I've asked for it, it downloads it, and it then sends it back to the person that's requested it. So I've now received an invoice back, which says, please find attached your copy invoice. And if I click on the PDF, I then have a copy of that particular invoice. So again, it's a very simple process there that we can set up that allows people to request invoices without having to go through the hassle of either calling you or having a self-service portal. So that's the end of my 5 little simple processes that I wanted to go through. I hope you found them useful and hopefully it's triggered a few things. Maybe you've thought about a few scenarios in which potentially you could use Power Automate or a Power App to start solving some of the business processes you're facing on a daily basis. Thank you very much.
So, pricing. This is complicated. I was told it was too complicated to put on the slide. What I've taken is an 80-page document and tried to make it into 4 sentences. It's not that easy. So this is broad brushstrokes. If you've got questions, ask us. We will try and advise you the best we can, clearly. Users with a BC Cloud license can use Power Automate flows that connect to Business Central. It's important that it's cloud. So if you've got an on-prem solution, that is not licensed for Power Automate. Okay, it has to be a cloud SaaS license, or if you've got dual use rights through the British Cloud, then you could use it for that. And the flows, the Power Automate flows, need to connect it to Business Central. They need to be in the context of Business Central. So Microsoft defined that as saying, if you delete Business Central, you would not need this Power Automate. So that's their general guidelines. It's typically would for Microsoft, but the idea is that it's a flow that benefits and assists in doing things in Business Central. Automatically triggered flows, ones that aren't triggered, like the monitoring the email inboxes rings, need to have a BC user license assigned to them. So it might be you buy a service license or something, you have the one service license that's used to use those flows. So it runs those flows effectively. I wouldn't recommend ever using a user account, because if that person leaves or if you change the license to somebody else, for instance, all your flows will stop working. So have one system account that you can use to run those. People with Microsoft or Office 365 licenses are given access to Power Automate that use the standard connectors. Now, this is really key. Not premium and not custom connectors. So a lot of the connectors that I've used today have been premium connectors. So DocuSign is a premium connector. Business Central is a premium connector. Credit Safe is a custom connector. So all of those would require a normal license. So you couldn't do things like that. But you can do some basic flows. So things like monitoring email inboxes, you could do something like that. If you want to monitor social media, I'm not sure if Twitter and Facebook are premium or not. But you have a basic level of functionality you can carry out with your 365 licenses. If you're not covered under those scenarios, then there is Power Apps pricing. So this is done on a per user, per app plan. So per user, per app per month is £4.10. This is for a Power App. This is okay. If you want to have a per user plan, which gives you an unlimited number of apps that you can run, it's £16.40 a month. And there's also a pay-as-you-go plan. So pay-as-you-go, it only charges you for those people that access an app in a given month. So if you've got 100 people, and potentially 20 of them will access it in a given month, you're better off buying for this pay-as-you-go plan rather than paying for 100 licenses, of which 80 will never be used. Power Automate, it's got a per-user plan, so if you're not covered, it's not a huge expense, to be quite honest. £12.30 a month will allow a user to have unlimited flows. So it's quite a simple thing. They're not covered by any existing licensing. The second one is a bit more complicated. It uses robotic process automation. So this allows you to do even more stuff with your flows. Basically, if you want a bot sitting there that's actually running things on your desktop, you can use robotic process automation to click, place, cases, do things. And I imagine a lot of Russian people have got similar processes. And then there's the per flow plan. So if you have a vast number of people accessing the flow, you can pay for the flow individually, and then it's unlimited users accessing that flow. £82.20 per flow, and you have a minimum of 5 in your licensing. Okay, that's about as simple as I can make it, and I haven't covered every eventuality. So I hope that gives you an idea about the pricing of it. So that's my 5 flows. I'm hoping that some of those have got people thinking, maybe thought, actually, we want some of that. We can see ways that we can improve our customer service, we can improve our efficiencies and automate things in our business.
Thank you. That was as you say, quite enlightening. So if I had a scenario of a number in our purchase ledger team, could a purchase invoice in BC, could a flow be triggered that sends out for an approval to their manager or whoever it is, or someone or budget holder in the business? They get a copy of that invoice approved and then it goes back in as approved.
Okay, I've got a few responses to that. The first one would be, when we have come up later, showing document capture, which has an approval flow for it, as well as the OCR side of things, the capturing data, it does it automatically, lovely approval portal. So that's one option. Yes, you could do. There is, in my, later on, I'll do another little session, what's new. One of the things they're bringing in is business event triggers, so you can actually monitor for specific things happening in Business Central. Some of those could be, input an invoice or releasing an invoice, and then you could trigger a flow that does something. So yes, you could build a flow to do exactly that and send a PDF out if you wanted, or you can do whatever you want basically. It's finding those use cases and then working out how best to deliver on those use cases.
And just to follow, and that recipient doesn't need a BC license.
So with document capture, I think the approval licenses
Team member.
team member, which is £7 something a month. So yes, it's not a high cost in that. If everything you do is completely external to Business Central, you can approve it. So then you need to have some kind of license to actually be able to approve it. Team member.
Okay, thank you.
I was impressed by your credit check.
Thank you.
And that's something that could be interesting for us. That we have probably 20 users. Only 2 are interested in credit checking.
Yeah.
Definitely don't sell something near it. How? So if we had a world where we had 2 people who we thought were running flows, would we need 2 licenses, or would we need to license our 20?
So they would be Business Central users anyway?
Business Central, but not in the cloud. They're on-prem.
Okay, on-prem, you would need the per user, per flow, isn't it? Per flow license, which is like £12 something a month. They'd need 2 of those. In fact, one of them probably do because it's an automated process. So you can probably set up one. You would need to have a license that connects into Business Central. Because you're on-prem, I'm not sure depending on the version you're on. It might be a little bit tricky, but you need to have a licensed Business Central user, and you need to have that power would cover you for a power automated flow as well. So you would need some licensing. You wouldn't need 20, you need probably 1, but with the different elements of the licensing.
If you've only got 2 users running that, you do it per user rather than per flow.
You can automate it though as well, so you don't need 1 then.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just wanted to say that there's one thing that Dutch people and Scottish people have in common. On money. So I would be interested, talking about what does it cost per month, and it looks like a lot. But what would be the cost of one accounting employee, well-educated, 5 years experience? What you pay every month? The employer cost, right? And if they're available.
Yes, exactly.
That would be my kind of.
It's needs to get as well, especially as you said a moment ago, Richard. You wouldn't trust you with 20 salespeople to do it. You don't need to. You give them a flow, you press a button, it does it for you.
I give myself the license to check good.
And then not changing, it's the beauty. The flow is changing. So, cool. Okay. That's it.
Any more questions?
I've got some